And welcome back to After Hours AM, everybody, the Criminal Code Edition. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me,
Eric Olson and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
Wow, we have a great guest on tonight, and we are going to be talking, of course, about the Adam Walsh case. And, of course, that's John Walsh, America's Most Wanted fame. And it's a tough case, guys. And getting into it, I'm going to let everyone know that has never heard the case. It's a very graphic case. So just letting you know going into it, it does deal with a child. And, again, just a bit of a disclaimer, because a lot of us are parents out there. And a lot of us don't want to hear about this, but at the same time, we have to hear about stuff like this. So we understand that it's real. And we understand the pain that can be inflicted by one person. And that being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to Eric Olson. And, of course, we have Dr. Clarissa Cole. I forgot to do the proper introduction, but I want to give that bit of a disclaimer before we got underway.
All righty. Joe Matthews is a retired Miami Beach detective sergeant, public speaker, and criminal investigator and analyst specializing in cold case homicides. He analyzes court and police case files, reports evidence, depositions, recorded interviews, and statements for case irregularities. He directs stalled investigations by generating crime scene hypotheses and motives to identify suspects for case resolution. Joe is also accepted as an expert witness in state and U.S. federal court as it relates to investigative procedures, investigative interviewing and interrogation, criminal investigative standard procedures, and policies of homicide investigations. Well, what has he done? Supervised and conducted over 1,000 death investigations during a 29-year police career as detective sergeant, supervisor in charge of homicide, sex crimes, and chief polygraph examiner for the city of Miami Beach, Florida Police Department. Supervisor in charge of Miami Beach Police SWAT team. Dang. After that, 12 years on-screen senior criminal investigator for Fox Broadcasting's America's Most Wanted, 12 years on-screen news contributor, analyst, and criminal investigator for Fox News Channel. The bio goes on for pages and years and decades, my friends. It is indeed fascinating and complete. You want to pick up all that information, go to Joe's website. And Joe can be found at joematthewsandassociates.com. All right, the book we're talking about, or the case we're talking about, of course, is Adam Walsh. The book that Joe co-wrote is Bringing Adam Home, The Abduction That Changed America. And I'm not going to give the details of the case, but I'll give a little bit of information. Bringing Adam Home, The Abduction That Changed America, co-written with Les Standiford, begins with Adam's abduction and ends with the Hollywood, Florida PD closing the case more than 15 years later. Imagine having that hanging. Essentially, the Hollywood PD had all the information they needed to implicate serial killer Ottis Toole in the murder. And by the way, he looks like an Ottis Toole. However, the lead investigator on the case, who only had 3 years' experience on the police force, strongly believed that a Walsh family friend was the culprit. It seemed as if the lead detective did everything in his power to disprove the fact that Toole was the killer, including not processing evidence such as photographs of the inside of Toole's car where he reportedly murdered Adam. And I will go no further because it gets very grim. But suffice to say, it was a bestseller, and it's amazing, amazing work, and it really is a case that changed America. Welcome to the program, Joe Matthews.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, Joe, I mean, really, you're right. This is a case that, as Eric said, that changed a lot of things, and it's a sad case, but it's also a case of justice. And could you take us through the case? I mean, how did Adam get taken, and the backstory of what led up to that abduction?
Okay, when you heard enough, just say, okay, Joe, that's enough. Okay?
Yep, we can do that.
On July 27th, 1981, Adam went missing from a Sears store. His mother went there with him, as she did many, many times. And she was within 15, 20 yards of him the whole time. She was buying a lamp, and he was playing a video game with another young boy that I ended up, many years later. The case was solved not 15, but 27 years after it happened. And she heard the video game, Pac-Man, it would just come out or whatever, and she heard it in the background, and she was gone for about 15 minutes. And when she came back, she saw it was on a reel, and it was just the noise of the computer game, and his son wasn't there. And she started looking within the store. They did an announcement. They talked to a security guard, a young lady that was either her first or second day on the job, and she knew nothing about it. And the search went within the store. Then when they couldn't find him, they notified the police, and it all went down from there. Then about 3 or 4 days later, I heard about it on the news that day, and when I got home that night, I have 4 children, and the irony of it is my oldest son is 1 day older than Adam. And my wife was on the way with the 4 kids to the Sears store and there's a cafeteria there. She was going to take them to lunch. And only because one of them was misbehaving and it created havoc in the car that she turned around and went home. And she said to me when I got home that night that this little boy's missing. My God, what if he was kidnapped? I said, I don't think so. He probably just got lost. They'll find him, and made light of it. And then about 2 or 3 days later, the Hollywood police called Miami Beach police and asked if they would allow me to come over and assist them by conducting polygraph tests. And I was happy to. The first person on the list that was made up was John Walsh. But for me, when I first got there, I met with a lieutenant, and he introduced me to the sergeant and the lead investigator, Jack Hoffman. And there's certain courtesies that we all extend to each other, but I didn't feel welcomed by Jack as soon as I met him for the first time. I mean, when they were introducing me, he didn't get up from his seat, to just shake hands or anything. He just looked up and said, "Yeah, hi." And that was the extent of it.
Wow, real personable.
Said, okay.
Yeah, real personable moment right there. So sorry I just had to interject there.
But it set the pattern, of his attitude towards me and towards the investigation. And I said to him, I said, before I conduct any polygraphs, I want to know everything you know and know, I'll formulate the questions as I deem are necessary. And I'm monitoring everything. And I went to Jack in a very cordial, professional way. And I said, Jack, with all due respect, I said, in Miami Beach, when I conduct a, homicide investigation, I assign one detective to be responsible for all the leads that come in, no matter where they're coming from. And he assigns it to a detective, and he's the one that demands the supplemental report as to what the lead showed. And then they'll present it to you, that report, and then you decide if you feel a follow-up is necessary.
Sure.
I said, right now, the phone is ringing. Whoever is close to a phone is answering it. And I see, information being written down on napkins, on scrap pieces of paper. And then they go to lunch and come back, and some are still there. The napkins are used by somebody who didn't have a napkin. Yeah. And that information is gone. So and his response
go ahead.
was, okay, when you go back to Miami Beach, you do it your way. We're in Hollywood, and I'll do it my way. And I said, okay. Then I have very little tolerance for things like that. And I decided, okay, fine. He's not receptive to me. And I went to the lieutenant. And I didn't say I told this to the detective. I just told him what I, saw.
Sure.
And when a police supervisor tells you, okay, I'll look into it, then nothing's going to be done.
Yeah, get stonewalled right then and there kind of deal.
Yeah, it's in every industry. Yeah, okay, I'll look into it,
Yeah.
It was Weinstein. Everybody, when they were complaining about him, oh, yeah, okay, we'll look into it. You know what I mean? But nothing was done.
Before you go further, Joe, can I ask you a question?
Anything. Go ahead.
What was it like to? This is hard for me because I don't deal with victims that often. What was it like to see, like, John Walsh and have to polygraph him about his own son? I wanted to ask you that question because It just seems like it would be so difficult.
See, the polygraph is more than just what you see on TV, asking a question and looking at the response.
Yeah.
The question, it's an intense interview that, based on the information he provides during that interview, it helps you formulate your question so outside issues don't affect the test. As an example, excuse me, let's say, God forbid, the person being tested, his brother died of a drug overdose, but the person being tested never used drugs in his entire life.
Yeah.
But there would be a false positive if I didn't know that and restructured the question by saying, other than the tragic death of your brother, have you personally ever snorted cocaine? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why the interview is so important. In many cases, when I did homicide investigations in the Crown, for the Crown in Canada, polygraph examinations, very few polygraphs were actually conducted because I was able to obtain confessions, in the pre-interview. So my interview with John, it was over 10 hours, and only the last hour was the actual examination. And I found John to be one of the nicest, sincere, loving men I've ever met. I mean, I just really, really liked him.
Yeah.
And what you see on TV is who he is. I mean, there's no pretense or anything. You know what I mean? It is what it is.
Well, he went on, and John Walsh, of course, just to give everyone an insight that might not know who we're talking about and might be living under a rock, is the founder and the host of America's Most Wanted. And so he took this tragedy and really turned around and did some very positive things and brought a lot of people to justice.
Absolutely. And actually, you got to give him and his wife, Reve Walsh, credit for the National Center of Missing Exploited Children. I mean, they spearheaded that. And that is a powerful, government subsidized organization. And it's done miracle work for missing and exploited children.
It's hard to even, for me, like I'm a bit younger. I was young when Adam Walsh went missing. Of course, I did hear about it. But to think back to that time period, this is the 80s that we're talking about. So, I mean, for me, it doesn't seem that long ago. In 1981, there was no national place that you could register that a child was missing. Nothing at all.
There was no cookbook on how to even investigate a missing child. That's why, Hollywood today is I mean, it was always a good police department. It just happened, the luck of the draw. The wrong detective with no supervision, did the investigation. Otherwise, that case would have been solved the first time Ottis Toole came to light.
Well,
but now there's policies, procedures, and organizations and federal agencies and state agencies that work with you anytime a child is missing. But back then, John was so creative. You got to look at the time period. There was no, like social media where you could, internet, where you could communicate with people. So what John did is he is the one that designed and printed thousands and thousands and thousands of flyers. And then he would have volunteers go to the airport, and they would stand by the gate of flights leaving for different states. And they go to the captain when he was ready to board. They say, we'll have somebody waiting at the gate for you. Would you just take this box of flyers? And that's how they got to California. That's how they got to Nevada. That's how they got all over the country.
Smart. That's so smart.
He did some great work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate now. It took a son to die, and really lit a fire under him, and life was not easy for John. I mean, it came to light now, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I caution. I mean, his wife was cheating on him, the best friend. He had a lot of side issues. On top of that, his son was gone. I can't imagine how he was able to go on. I mean, talk about the intestinal fortitude.
It is remarkable, but people don't know the sleepless nights and the heartache that he experienced. And I don't think anyone, unless you, God forbid, you lose a child in circumstances like that, could ever even imagine it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was the tragedy of this whole investigation. because after I interviewed John, and I cleared him beyond any doubt, and this guy opened up as if he was, going to confession, because it didn't matter anything he did in life. It only mattered that if I could give me some information that might help, to find his son, he was willing to give everything. And then and one of the, going over the family tree and everything else, I found out that it was Jimmy Campbell, which was he was like a kid brother to him. The guy came from a troubled family, and John, befriended him, and the kid looked up to him. And as the kid grew up, they worked at the Diplomat Hotel together. John was in charge of the pool, and the kid was he cleaned up after and everything. And then I looked. And he told me, he said that he even for a period of time lived in the little efficiency behind the house, and for rent-free as long as he went to college. And if he didn't go to college, then he wouldn't be able to live there. And in return, he would, do the yard work and whatever. Well, when Reve had Adam, and he was close to the family, that he was Adam's godfather.
Yeah.
Well, I looked at the list that Hoffman had presented to me. The first list was about 10 people that he interviewed, polygraphed. He wasn't included. And
interesting.
so I said to John,
That's crazy
that
to me.
is very interesting that he wouldn't be included.
That shows that they didn't do an interview
Yeah.
to determine this. And I said to him, I said, well, where's Jimmy now? And he says, well, he's probably searching for him. Everybody, they have a command post at the house. And he said, let me call the house. And he was there. And I said, well, have him come over now.
Yeah,
and,
get him cleared.
And Jimmy got to the police station. I mean, I met John at 9 o'clock in the morning. Jimmy got over there at 9 o'clock at night. And I strike while the iron's hot. I interviewed him that night. Well, I knew something was bothering him, but I didn't know what. And the interview went on until he admitted that there was a time when John was doing a lot of traveling, was never home, and there was an intimacy between him and Reve.
Wow.
And he was devastated, thinking that this had to come up, and but it had nothing to do with Adam going missing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It wasn't germane to the case.
Maybe there was a strain in their marriage, but between John and Reve at that time. But I mean, this woman is the mother of all mothers. I mean, she just was just a good mother, and John was a great father. And they had a loving relationship in the family.
Yeah.
It's just that she made some wrong decisions. And she had to live with that for the rest of her life.
No, Joe,
But
you come, just to back up a little bit, you go into the police department. They weren't very receptive to you being there, to the point to where, hi, how you doing? That kind of stuff going on. You have detectives.
Just him, not the police department, but just Hoffman.
Just him. And then, of course, at the police department, while this investigation is being conducted in earnest, they're using napkins. Now, at that point, you having the more experience in these investigations and having all the qualifications you have, were you a little surprised that they just didn't say, you know what, the guy's right, let's do some better police work? Were you kind of surprised at some of the fumbling and bumbling of the police department? Because it's firmly cited in a lot of the stuff I've read that there was a lot of police, the dropping of the ball going on.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you want to find an excuse, the excuse was, a man with that personality and his attitude, he should never have been a detective. Number one. But having said that, there was a lack of supervision. Had he worked under my supervision, and I saw there was a lack of cooperation. Number one, he never would have worked for me. But had he worked for me, I would have corrected. Any good supervisor would have corrected it. For whatever reason, there was no supervision, and after I completed my interview with Jimmy that night, and he told me what he told me, and I tested him, and I know for sure, positively for sure, he wasn't involved in any way. And he had a fail-safe alibi. I mean, he was.
Sure.
They were doing a filming of a commercial, and he was out on one of those it's like a surfboard with a sail, I forgot what they call it.
Yeah.
But he was being paid in the backdrop of this commercial, going back and forth. So they had him on film for like 10, 12 hours that day.
Sure.
So there's no way, he would have been involved. But when I was leaving, and it was like 3:30 in the morning, and I thought I was the last one in there, and I see Hoffman, and he said, "What are you still doing here?" And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm working over." And I said, I just completed another test. He said, "You tested Walsh for whatever it was, 15, 18 hours?" I said, "No, I tested Jimmy Campbell."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "I didn't put him on the list. Who authorized you to test somebody not on the list?" And I wanted to say, the hell with you. But I just listened to him, and I said, I found out he was Adam's godfather, and he lived in the house up until, a few months ago. And I thought it was necessary to test him.
Yeah.
And then what I regret is telling him what he admitted to me about his relationship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because had I not brought that up, he would never have known, and he wouldn't have focused all his attention on him.
Yeah.
And
did you tell him? I suppose.
And my report was so sensitive.
Yeah.
I demanded, and he agreed, but he lied, to put my report not in the case file, but in evidence. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't have it. No one would have access to it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
And
because it's
they
really
focused
not
all the attention on Jimmy.
Yeah, because it's his affair, as horrible as it is, it really isn't germane to the case.
Not at all.
So like I said, as horrible as it is, and no matter what your personal thoughts were, it doesn't get you any closer to finding Adam.
No.
That's more of a drama on the side. Well, after you clear everybody, and they all seem to be coming up great alibis, the polygraph tests all come clean. I did the head scratching start, because usually stats say that when a murder like this happens, it's usually a relative that's doing it.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're the boyfriend, the relative, somebody that's close to the child, but not in this case.
Yeah, and we're gonna get to that.
But it's like any homicide, no matter which one, even the Adam Walsh case, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, and if one piece just doesn't fit, you don't file it down to make it fit, because the rest of the pieces won't fit. You got to take it apart and start over. Yeah. And once that I got all the pieces together, everything made sense. I mean, there's no questions about anything that I have. I mean, I encourage people to ask a question. I'll try to answer it, but it's just it all fits as to Adam was never abducted from within the store. You know what I mean? There are people that think that that he was abducted from within the store.
I mean,
he wasn't, because the young 16-year-old security guard eventually admits, because she was in fear of her job,
mm-hmm.
that when Adam was playing the video game with the young boy that the mother introduced him to, that was playing, and he was willing to play with Adam, and I interviewed him, 20 years later, there were two street kids that came in, and they bullied their way, saying they were going to play. Well, this kid wasn't a bully. I mean, he wasn't somebody you could bully, so there was an altercation.
Sure. Joe, there was a tussle. Yeah, exactly. In the notes I read, there was a tussle, of course, over the video game. And they kicked all of them out of the store, including little 6-year-old Adam. That's what I read.
The security guard told me that she thought that was his brother. So when he said his mother wasn't there, she never asked Adam. She just escorted him out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother's inside the store looking for him, and Adam's standing outside.
Yeah.
And that's where Ottis Toole grabbed him.
And he's only 6.
With a kid that had no relation to him.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I read in the book was that the other kid, the kid that she kicked Adam out with, didn't his mother come out right away and take him away? And didn't he want to wait for Adam? Something like that?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. He said, and she said, his mother will come along. Let's go. And back then, nobody thought of my wife hit the key thing on that. She said, before Adam Walsh, a mother would hold a child's hand.
Yep.
And after Adam Walsh, she held her by the wrist.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Adam Walsh's abduction changed
everything.
child safety and child laws as 9/11 changed, airport flights. You know what I mean? It just it changed society.
I'm about at what Adam's age would be today. I'm about there. I'm 43 years old, so I'm not very far from what his age would be. Had he survived, and we have to run a break, but when we come back, we're going to take that dark turn into what indeed did happen to Adam and who did it to Adam. When we come back right after this. And welcome back to After Hours AM, the Criminal Code, everybody. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis, right along with me,
Eric Olson and
Dr. Clarissa Cole.
And we are really having a really interesting discussion and a kind of a, for a lot of us parents out there, a gut-wrenching discussion at the same time. Joe Matthews, and quite honestly, Joe, your credentials are stellar, and your work in homicide has just been impeccable. I mean, really, you are truly one of the best we've ever interviewed, to be completely honest with you. And you worked on the Adam Walsh case. Now, we were getting to the point where Adam was outside. How did the abduction happen? Best of your knowledge of what you guys uncovered, how did this all go down?
Ottis Toole, he was friends with Henry Lee Lucas. They were lovers and friends. And they were both molesting Ottis's niece at the time. And Ottis Toole was separated when they went on a road trip, the two of them. And Lucas and the girl were arrested, but Ottis thought they abandoned him. And he attempted suicide. Too bad he didn't die. But he went back to Jacksonville and he decided to replace his niece and find himself a little girl. And he drove down, and one of the reasons why he picked South Florida is he was a hustler, and he could do a gay trick for more money in South Florida than he could in Jacksonville. And that was his reasoning for picking South Florida. And he attempted, 2 days before he saw Adam, he attempted an abduction from a Kmart, which was only a mile from the Sears. And the girl screamed, and the mother ran over, and he fled, and she reported it to the police. Mm-hmm. The day Ottis Toole was in the Sears Mall, but he wasn't in Sears. He was just taking a walk through the mall. He actually mentioned a wig shop that he would look at. He was a transvestite too, and he looked at wigs, and it was called Cadaver Wigs. And when I did the research on that, Cadaver Wigs was only open for 2 years. The year that Adam went missing, and the following year, then it went out of business. Mm-hmm. So, and it's hard for anybody to have known that, especially Ottis Toole, the name of the company. So, when he was leaving, he sees a little boy, and this wasn't a premeditated abduction. He just sees a little boy standing there by himself. So he double parked the car, which stalled traffic, and in parking lot traffic, and he walks up to him, and he offers him a toy. He has toys, and Adam, compliant, walked with him. He opened up the door, he jumped in the car, and then soon after, Ottis's own words is the kids start crying. Now, this was actually witnessed by someone that actually saw the abduction and came forward, and the police discounted it. You know what I mean? And it was just unbelievable. I tracked him down in 1996 and again in 2008. And he gave, and what solved the case really was this man, because he gave me information on the vehicle that no one else knew about. And there was a certain kind of damage to the vehicle that when I looked for the crime scene photos, which means the FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, processed the vehicle like 3 years later when they found Ottis Toole on another homicide, and there was the exact damage that this guy described, and they went. Well, Ottis Toole, in his own words, says that Adam wouldn't stop crying, and he punched him in the stomach, and then he kept crying again, and he strangled him until he knocked him out. Well, I would like to think, and I believe that Adam died of asphyxiation, and then he decided to pull over, and we found the location and everything else. It was about 2 miles south of where they found Adam's head, and he beheaded him, and then he took the head and put it in the front seat with himself, and he put the body in the trunk, and then when he realized, he actually did terrible things to the head, and then he decided he didn't want to be caught with the body part in the car, so he pulled over, and there was one of these what do you call it, it's like a little pond, you know what I mean, but for drainage and stuff like that, but it was manicured, and there was a dock, and he threw the head in there.
Wow. Did he ever say why he beheaded Adam?
Ottis Toole, different serial murderers, they all, not all, but they're like, this is Joe's analysis of it. They're like, let's say, a pedophile. And a lot of pedophiles, most of them, they have a certain age, a certain sex that they're attracted to. Well, serial murderers, like Ted Bundy, he liked a certain hairstyle and a certain color hair and a certain age of his female victims. Well, Ottis Toole was a serial murderer, but he was an opportunist. I mean, it didn't matter if you're young or old. It didn't matter if you're male or female. When he got the urge, or he thought it would be a kick, he would just, kill him. And then he'd experiment. They did postmortem sex, and they did, he actually was cannibalistic, and he tried. He admitted this. I mean, he would eat, the flesh, and he would eat the body parts, and they, when they asked him about eating, and he said that. They said, "You mean I ate it raw?" He said, "Of course not. Who in the hell would ever eat it raw? You gotta cook it. You know what I mean?" And
wow.
And that's what he did. So when he took the body, he dumped the head in the pond, and he took the body home. And it was after he was depressed because the only thing that was close to him, he had one sister that was close to him, and his mother. And his mother had died a few months before, and he. As a tribute to his mother, he was a pyromaniac. I mean, he used to get excited, setting fires, and he set the house on fire, but only the porch, a good portion of the house, but the porch portion of the house burnt. And so he slept in the car with Adam's body in the trunk of the car, and but when he got there to the house, he had this big tub that he used to burn the insulation off a wire so he could sell the copper. And he put the body in there, and he burnt the body, and he even tasted it to see if it, if you like to eat it. And then he put the smoldering body in the trunk, and while he's trying to sleep, there was a lot of smoke and everything. So, he was afraid the car would catch on fire.
Sure.
So he turned on the water with the water hose, and he put it out. Well, I checked all the records and everything else, and even though the house was abandoned and everything else, the water was still on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it all matched. Everything matched, and then he dumped it in the county dump.
And did they ever recover Adam's body? I'm not aware that I saw anything where they recovered.
No. This came out years later. Okay. Nobody. It was unrecoverable. It was dumped in the dump, and once it goes in the dump, the odds of finding it, even if it's the next day, are slim to none. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and then, of course, there was physical evidence linking Adam's head to being in the car. Am I correct? Yeah.
That's that. I call it the hidden Mickey. If you ever go to Disney World or in California with Disneyland, there's Mickey Mouse ears and heads all over, you know what I mean? And people have contests how many they could find. And you could be on the castle and look down, and you see it in a flower bed, or you could see it a little one in the mirror,
Yeah.
Not not for Dr. Cole, but for the gentleman. It's like the old Playboy magazine. It had the little bun something on the front, you know what I mean, on the front page.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea.
Yes. Eric over there is absolutely innocent.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Well, there's a hidden Mickey in every death investigation, and that's the wow factor. That's the one that says, oh, my God, that's it. And when I was putting together this manuscript, to prove that he did it, one of the most compelling things was the damage to the vehicle. So I'm looking for the crime scene photos that FDLE would have taken when they processed the car, and I couldn't find them. And I worked on the case for 2 years and 8 months.
Yeah.
And when I first was assigned the case, they gave it to a sergeant, and they said, I was introduced to them over the phone, and they said that anything that I wanted, make sure they provided it. And I never needed anything because I had the whole case file. I had my own investigation. I did my own interviews, and but I couldn't find the crime scene photos. So I called them, and I said, "This is Joe Matthews." Yeah, I know who you are. And I said, "Oh my God, what is this? Another Hoffman?" And I said to him, I can't find the FDLE crime scene photos when they processed his vehicle, the Cadillac. And he said, well, obviously we don't have them. I said, okay, I could agree with that. I said, since FDLE would have taken probably about 100 photos, could you contact FDLE and give me a copy of the photos? Anything else? I said, nope, that's it. And he said, okay, goodbye. And I waited 2 weeks, called him up. His name was Lionel. I said, hey, Lyle, I said, it's Joe Matthews, yeah? I said, how'd you make out? He said, with what? I said, FDLE's crime scene photos. Oh, they can't find them. And I said, they can't find them? I said, if we're looking for a little box in a warehouse full of big boxes, maybe you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
But we're looking for crime scene photos. I said, would you do me a favor, call them back, see if they found them? Yeah, okay, sure. And he hangs up. A week later, I call him back, and he said, no, they don't have them. I said, okay, I appreciate it. As soon as I hang up, I call up FDLE. I called the crime lab. I talked to the supervisor in charge, and he said, hey, I said, I'm calling on behalf of Sergeant Bean, and I want to know if you guys found the Adam Walsh crime scene photos on Ottis Toole's car. He said, who? What? I don't know what you're talking about. He said, hold on. Then he asked everybody there, and nobody knows. Nobody's asked for these things for 20 years.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And I said, I'm looking for, this is the case number, da-da-da. And he said, all right. He said, today's Friday. I'll have somebody call you Monday. I said, that'd be great. Well, the young lady, an FDLE agent, calls me Tuesday, apologizes for not calling me Monday. And she said, we have 98 photos. What do you want to send? Now, everything in life, whether it's a relationship or whether it's police work, and it's forgotten, and it's so important, is communication. You got to talk to people. And the more you talk, the more information you get. I've solved more cases from talking than I ever did with forensics.
Sure.
And we start talking, and she said to me, what's really disturbing? I said, what's that? She said, this case, this is the last thing I was doing for my presentation. She said, it's almost 28 years old, and we processed the vehicle 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And she said, our protocol is we develop the film into negatives. We file the negatives, and only upon request do we develop the negatives. Yeah. She said, this is the very first request we've ever had for the crime scene photos.
Interesting.
And as upset as
28 years later?
Yeah, no kidding.
Nobody requested them. With all the different agencies working this case, nobody thought of requesting it. And I probably wouldn't have thought it unless I was looking for a specific picture to look at the damage.
Sure.
So, and then the irony of it, had Sergeant Bean not lied, and he admitted to the chief that he didn't call him and he lied, but had he not lied, he would have got the photos and reviewed them before sending it to me, and he would have, saw what I found.
Yeah, yeah.
So the bottom line is, I get the photos, and I'm looking for that hidden Mickey, and I thought the hidden Mickey would be the damage to the vehicle. Yeah. And I saw the vehicle. I said, oh, my God, it's exactly the same. Even the color from the transfer of paint on the dent is exactly what the guy described. So I thought that was it. Then I'm looking, and we're all familiar with luminol, right? You know.
Yep.
It lights up
Luminol,
blood when you
exactly.
spray on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes blood into neon signs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like a blue lacquer paint, and
Yep.
and I'm looking, and I say, oh my God, maybe this is the hidden Mickey, because Ottis said when he beheaded Adam, he was so covered in blood he had to throw away his shoes and change his pants. Well, I got 2 footprints on the driver's side of the car, you know, on the floor mat or with the carpet. It was black carpeting, and I said, oh my God, this is it. Then they found a machete in his car. And they processed that, and on the sheath of the machete, when they opened it up, and on the handle, a wooden handle of the machete that he used for work, it looked like somebody spray painted it with blue.
Oh.
And I said, "Oh my God!" It was like a sponge. You know?
Wow.
And then I'm looking and looking, and I see the final picture, and I said, "Oh my God!" And I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And it was a blood transfer from Adam's face that when it was thrown in the back floorboard of the car, it transferred onto the carpeting, and you have Adam's image of his face. And the closest thing I could think of is like the Shroud of Turin, you know what I mean, where you actually see the outline of the face and the mouth open, and the nose and the eyes. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's
Joe,
right there. It's in the book. It's right there, the picture. And
Yeah.
I said, "Oh my God,
Joe, what was that
that's
like?
the hidden Mickey."
What was that like to see that, though? I mean, you know, you're a human being and a father, and you know,
It's
how
hard
did you
to
do
look
it?
at, isn't
yeah,
it, Joel?
It
It's
is
hard to look
horribly
at.
hard to look at. And then you have this
Because
monster.
it's his face. It is his face.
Yeah, it's his
I
face.
mean, no doubt.
And then you have this
John
monster.
refused to look at it,
Yeah.
but Reve wanted to know every detail because
Yeah.
she'd been protected, and that's what she was upset about. Don't protect me. I'm his mother. I want to know everything.
Yeah.
And when she looked at it, she said, "Oh my God, that is his face." You know what I mean? And it just
You can tell.
Man,
it was
that
just
is so
a wow
sad.
factor, you know.
That is so sad and so hard to look at. What happens to Ottis Toole? What happens to him? Is he brought to full justice?
Ottis Toole was arrested on 7 different homicides, and he got life in prison on the different homicides. And in 1996, I was requested that they had a new 95 correction. There was a new chief of police in Hollywood that was in charge of homicide for Miami, and he knew me. And he called me and he said, "You were familiar with the case?" He said, "I want you to work this as a cold case." I worked it for 1 year, but I never had access to the entire case file. And then I wanted to interview Ottis Toole. And I knew before you do an interview, you do all your homework. So I knew that he didn't want to talk to police and everything else. And at the time, I was teaching at Nova Southeastern University at the Center of Forensic Psychology. And I asked Nova's permission, and I wrote with their stationery a letter to Ottis Toole. And they said he was totally illiterate. He could read, he could write.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said, I'm doing a book on serial murderers, and I have 10 different, serial murderers I'm going to interview. And I said, these are the people I'm going to interview, and you're one of them. Would you like to have to be interviewed?
Yeah.
And I said, it will be in the library, so it wouldn't have to, be the surroundings of the prison. And I'll bring in Kentucky Fried Chicken, which he loved.
Mm-hmm.
And
you got him with the chicken.
and he agreed.
Yes, you are wily.
He agreed to it. 2 days before I'm ready to leave, I said, my God, the guy I'm going up there with, he hadn't called me. This first time he hadn't called me 2-3 times a day in over 2 years. And then I called him. I said, hey, are we flying? Are we driving? Bring enough clothes because we got to be up there a week. I'm going to take my time and talk to him until I get everything.
Yeah.
And he said, Joe, nobody called you? And I said, oh, call me about what? The Hollywood chief that asked me to do it as a cold case investigation, knowing how close we were now, decided that they would do the interview themselves.
Oh.
And they didn't need my assistance anymore. And the bottom line, they sent a detective up there. The first thing he did is identify himself as a Hollywood cop, and Ottis Toole told him to screw off, and that was the extent of it, and never was interviewed.
Oh.
And they never got to charge. I mean, what people don't realize, they never got to charge Ottis Toole because he died like at the same time that you were kind of closing the case and convincing people once and for all that Ottis Toole did.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I was so compelled. I mean, obligated on this case. I even told the detectives. I said, "Look, the guy's dying of a liver disease and hepatitis and everything else." And I said, you got to hold his hand and get a dying declaration.
Yeah.
And then Hollywood didn't even know he died.
Didn't he say he did it? He gave a confession at some point and then he recanted?
Well, throughout the investigation, people say, that he recanted every time. He gave the confession 21 times and he recanted 3 times. But the 3 times, one was, I know I did it, but my attorney said I didn't do it. I mean, you know what I mean?
Man.
That's not recanting.
Yeah.
And another time was like, I didn't kill that little boy. I never killed anybody. Well, we know he was convicted 7 times out of God knows how many.
Well,
and, so he did give a dying declaration to the chief of the medical office at the prison. You know what I mean? Saying he killed that little boy, and that's the only one he saw about doing. And then I interviewed his sister, and she told me she was the only one close to him. And I have letters that he wrote her, and she wrote him, and she'd bring him cigarettes. And he told her that she said, "Is it true that you killed that little boy?" And he said, "Yeah, I didn't. He's the only. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry." And she said, "That's the last time I talked to him. I refused to ever see him again. I ever write him a letter or do anything with him."
What was John Walsh's and the family's reaction to, really, it almost sounds like he talked about it very cavalier a lot of times, this guy and what he'd done?
John, when I presented everything to him and his family, his wife, it was like a sigh of relief, knowing that, thank God, this terrible thing is coming to an end. Not an end that, Reve described it perfectly. She said, losing a child, the only thing I could relate it to is like if you lost an arm, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Throughout the whole day, you don't have only but one arm. And when you go to sleep, you can't even turn over because you don't have that arm. Yeah. And when you wake up, the first thing you realize, you don't have that arm. And that's how it is when you lose a loved one. It's on your mind 24/7.
Yeah.
First thing you think about, and then the only relief you have is some days, it's not the first thing you think about,
Oh, yeah, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't. I'm a father as well, and excuse me, it chokes me up a little bit to hear that because I couldn't imagine that. I really couldn't. And then, of course, to have to sit through the waiting and the wondering and who did it and how it happened. And then, of course, this scumbag turns up and he decides that he's going to do this to your child. I don't know if I could keep my sanity with all that. So they're stronger than I think I would have been, to be honest with you.
Well, those are the things that we'll never know what they went through.
Yeah.
And I know John and I have talked many a night where, it make you cry if you heard the conflicts in his mind and the things that went through his mind and how he could just end it all by skydiving. I mean, like what do you call those kites? You know what I mean? And then just
hang gliding.
Just hang glide and just let it go down into the ocean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really remarkable on what he's accomplished and how he was so focused on.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't a vigilante to say, I'm going to go and try to get him, somebody to kill him. It was how could we prevent this from happening, and how many other children's lives he saved. It's remarkable.
Sure. I mean, he went on to really bring a lot of people to justice. I mean, thousands he's brought to justice since.
And he recovered a lot of children. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it really is remarkable.
And Reve, she's a sweetheart. I'm telling you, she's like the one that is behind the screen. You know what I mean? But she is a powerful woman. She's just a strong-willed woman that gets things done.
Yeah, it's tragic. It had to happen, I mean, oh my God, just look at these photos and courtesy of your book, of course. Why don't you tell the audience where they can get your book and a little bit more about yourself, how to contact you, all that kind of good stuff?
Well, it's Joe at Joe Matthews and Associates. That's my my email address, and you have to spell everything out. And if you just go to Google and look up Detective Joe Matthews, it gives you all the information on the book and everything else. You could get it anywhere. And it's in paperback now. And it was a New York Times bestseller.
Yeah, it's a great book. And really, it's really well written. And the way that you conducted the investigation was really remarkable, Joe. And then having the justice, I mean, so close, too, to being able to sit with him and get that confession. I in a lot of ways, listening to what you're telling me, you were cheated of that. I mean, you deserved that, to get that firsthand confession.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. And you know what? There's so many other tragedies out there. It's remarkable how many heartaches that there are, the calls that I get, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And I tell the parents, they'll say, well, I know she didn't commit suicide. I know this, I know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And before I review a case, I say to them, every investigation, there's flaws in the investigation. There's always a flaw. Now, if the flaw is minimal and it doesn't affect the outcome of the investigation, then there's no need, for me to get involved. But if the flaw affects the outcome of the investigation, therefore a mistake was made, then they deserve the right to know what happened to their loved one.
Yeah. I agree. And Joe, thanks so much for coming on the show. Joe Matthews, everybody, top-notch investigator, great author as well. Pick up the books, read what he has to say. There's a lot here we didn't cover in this interview that's in the book. Pick that up, and of course, we keep everyone in our prayers that are right now as we speak still missing loved ones, and hopefully some justice can happen or some resolution can happen to those people as well. But it's people like Joe working behind the scenes that bring us that resolution. So, Joe, thanks a ton for coming on the show. And I'm going to say to everybody, this is After Hours AM Criminal Code, and this is kind of a somber one, guys. This is a tough one to sit through, but there is a message here that, A, tragedy happens, but B, there is justice for that tragedy as well. Sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as we'd like it to, but a lot of times it does, again, because through the work of people like Joe. But take care of each other, love each other, and look out for each other.